Brothers and sisters, we're under starters' orders. If you could take your seats, please. That would be wondrous. Truly wondrous. Just, if I may, very brief, you've seen me before today and you all know who I am anyway. Just very briefly before at the start of this session of our day, we're going to, Mary-Jane and Aidan are going to report on how we're getting along with our refugee project in the diocese. But before I hand over to them, I would just like to say one or two things. First of all, a very big thank you to everybody in the diocese, not just you here. It's an opportunity for me really to thank the diocese publicly for the wonderful response we've had to the call that went out quite a while ago now actually, to support the refugee community coming into this part of the world. And a very particular thanks to the members of the refugee project steering group that we've set up, which consists of Sarah Kilmartin, who's our diocesan financial secretary, Deacon Andrew Bays, who's standing there at the back hiding behind a display screen, Deacon Mark Woods, who's our press man for the diocese, Canon Kieran O'Brien from Brighton, and then Mary-Jane and Aidan and myself. And we meet from time to time to further the work of the project. And what we've really been doing over the last little while is dispersing the funds that have come in to projects that are doing wonderful work with refugees, particularly across the south coast, and increasingly starting to move north. It was very obvious to us that to try and reinvent the wheel and develop a brand new structure when there were experts doing wonderful work already would be a bit of a waste of time. Far better for us to support and enable those existing organisations where the expertise lies to develop their work and enable them to respond ever better to the need. And that's really what's been going on. So a big thank you to the diocese and a thank you to the team. I mentioned at this morning this little document from Pope Francis, and he has in the document, it's paragraph 16 for those of you who are going to rush home and look it up. He refers to the road of mercy, the road of mercy. It is the road of mercy on which we meet so many of our brothers and sisters who reach out for someone to take their hand and become a companion on the way. And I suggest to you that that is a wonderful image for the work that we're doing in this diocese, and it's going on in other dioceses too, to assist those coming to these islands as refugees. People who are reaching out for someone to take their hand and to accompany them on their journey. And that is exactly what we are doing with this project in our diocese, so a very big thank you for that. You've seen, I think, the second newsletter that we shoved out, rather smartly produced little number, if I may say, about the work of the refugee project. Just to say to you that we kind of expanded the work of the diocese in a sense with that newsletter, because it was produced by the residents of Her Majesty's Prison Coldingley. They run a very, very smart print shop up there, and I was invited to visit their print shop just a few weeks ago. And they produced that for us. So not only were we spreading the news of the project, but we were also helping some of those in prison within our diocese to find dignity in work. And so that in itself was a valuable thing. There will be another newsletter in due course, but I'll leave Aidan and Mary-Jane to say more about that. So continue to pray for this project. Please continue to support it as you have done so very generously, as it takes new turnings and new steps on the way. We will find yet more ways to accompany those brothers and sisters who look for us to take them by the hand.
Right. Thank you, Bishop Richard. Yes, it's been nearly 18 months now since Bishop Richard's urgent call to action, coinciding with the call from Pope Francis and Mr. Cameron saying UK government would take up to 20,000 over a 5-year period, and those shocking and horrible images that dominated our news screens. A lot has happened in those 18 months. I can remember very vividly, Mary-Jane and I sitting down together September, October 2015, saying, very enthusiastic about the task in front of us. And one of the things that we were enthusiastic about it was that we thought this was a great opportunity to bring people together from different faiths, communities, local authorities, people of no faith at all, and work in that way. And funny enough, 18 months later, I was just by chance on the phone to Diane Peters, who's heading up the sort of Guildford, the Anglican Diocese of Guildford response, and she said to me, if there's a silver lining, these are her words, not mine, if there is a silver lining to this dreadful crisis, it's that people of different denominations are coming together to work for the common good. And that is exactly, those were her exact words, so I just kept thinking of those throughout today. From a personal point of view, it's a real privilege to be part of it, and it's obviously, you can imagine the experience that I'm getting, visiting agencies, working with Voices in Exile in particular, but more recently with David Roberts at SVP and Anna and Sandy at Networks, getting to meet people that are directly benefiting from our response, but also working closely with those who are at the sharp end of things, supporting them. And a personal experience that I often share is to say that just before Christmas last year, 2015, this was the third family that arrived in our diocese from Syria through the Vulnerable Resettlement Programme. And Mary-Jane took me airside to meet a young couple. The wife was 6.5 months pregnant, and it was quite a traumatic experience for all concerned, especially me. I wasn't prepared for it in any way, and I was left rather shocked and saddened by it. And I'd already been thinking, because the UK had taken up to 1,000 people before Christmas, so they were on target after 3 months to meet this 20,000 target. But a lot of people were sharing stories going, yes, and they're very happy, and I have to say, I had my sort of suspicions, but exactly 6 months later, I accidentally bumped into this couple outside Mary Mag's church, and they just had an English language class at the drop-in centre that Voices in Exile were running. And the wife was very smiley and showed me her baby, and the husband threw his arms around me. And they both spoke very good English, and both told me, with big smiles on their face, what an easy language English is to learn. And well, I mean, what can you say? I mean, I was a doubting Thomas, and that's really, I needed to see it with my own eyes, and I did. And I'm very, very passionate about this resettlement program, that people come to these shores through an organised scheme, and the very most vulnerable people in the region, which happens to be Syria at the moment, are coming through in a timely and orderly fashion. But that's the big challenge. I won't say too much about the rest of our response, because it is in the newsletter, and if you haven't read it, you're going to get another copy in your goodie bag to go home with today. So, but we have had a great response to this newsletter. I mean, we printed 10,000, and the vast majority of them went out to all our parishes. And financially, a further £16,500 came into our migrant fund in the time since the newsletter went out, which took our migrant fund income to just over £90,000 over an 18-month period. And I'll come to a little bit more about that in a moment. But of course, it's not all about money, it's not all about giving, and it is having a ripple effect, I think, in terms of the way different people are getting engaged in this, and different people are able to help. And it was written for anybody and everybody, and to reach the parts other newsletters can't reach. I think that was one of the things that we decided before we sent it out. And one of those things that came out of that, which Anna from Eastbourne spoke about, was two parishes rang me just before Christmas and said, could we encourage our children to wrap presents for refugee children? And of course, I said, yes, of course, and I'll take personal responsibility for them getting out there. Well, Woking alone wrapped over 200 presents and completely filled my car with them. And Sunningdale, as well as this beautiful purple bike, put in another 100 or so presents. So we've managed to distribute them to the organisations that we know wanted them, and some local groups that I know around here in Crawley and East Grinstead. And the remainder were dropped with the Jesuit Refugee Service in Wapping last Monday, and who said that they would easily be able to sort of pass those presents on to children over the next few months. So that's just a wonderful sort of little example of different ways that parishes and other people will continue to get involved. But it's this is what we set out to do in terms of way of working, and it hasn't really changed over time. We're still looking to build this, and I sense that there is more so than ever, or I have a feeling of a momentum growing in our communities. So communities around Surrey, for instance, are still working closely with some of the borough councils just to take their first family, but they're engaged and they're effective working with their local authorities. And we want to do more work in Surrey. But you know, the local talks that often it's Mary-Jane and I together, like today, but often it's just one or t'other. And they have been a very sort of fruitful way of getting to know local groups, local people, and engaging our response in working closely with them. And we've got one coming up on the 25th of February in Worthing Deanery, and Worthing for Refugees will be part of that talk. This is going to take me back to a former working life. Some figures. I've just said that we've received over 90,000 of the money, and probably 70,000 of that has been committed. Not exactly spent, because some of the funding that we've supported is over a 2-year period and is sort of going out in phases. But the bulk of it has been committed. It's really what's come in since the last newsletter that is available for application. And we have, as Bishop Richard said, we're sort of focused on the groups that are already there and meeting the need that is there. And the need that is very acute is destitute migrants, support work, casework, legal work, transport, English language, all the sorts of practical food banks, all the sort of things that destitute people with no recourse to public funds would need the service of. And we've been able to expand, in particular, the service at Voices in Exile, but also empower more groups to do more work. And one of the reasons why we've done that, of course, is that we haven't had so many people coming through the resettlement program, which was the original intention of going out to get so much support and help. Oh, I'll get the hang of this eventually. So three organisations have benefited from it up till now. Mary-Jane's going to talk about the excellent work of Voices in Exile, and the capacity that's been built and the work that they've been able to do over in 2016, but also the challenges ahead, because it does sound like an awful lot of money, but it doesn't last forever, this sort of money. I mean, after 1 or 2 years, we were all thinking to ourselves, well, how's this going to become sustainable, and how can we make sure that the groups that we are funding are on sound financial footing, and that we don't have a sort of a peak of service and then go back to not being able to offer anything at all. Eastbourne and St Leonard's, you've heard from David, who talked about the SVP, and Anna, so I won't go on any more than that. But just to say that in our recent meeting in January, we looked at sort of priorities for the coming year, or the coming 2 years, and we decided on sort of 2 real areas. Oh dear. Now. I know, I've got it now. Quite simply, we want to continue what we're already doing and attracting funding and do some active fundraising to support those groups that I've just talked about. But we also want to develop new schemes, because the newsletter contains quite a lot of information about community sponsorship. And there's a couple of schemes that I'm aware of, one potentially here in Crawley, one in Worthing, and we really want to, whether it's through community sponsorship, topping up of rents, or finding property that the diocese itself owns that could be used. We really want to start pulling out all the stops on getting property available so that we can resettle more of these families. Because this time last year, Alison Gelder, Chief Executive of Housing Justice, was making it quite clear that we have a housing crisis in the UK, and it's particularly acute in London and the South East. So that's the sort of focus of our work this year, I think. And a newsletter will come out sort of post-April with more stories and encourage more engagement from everybody in our parish communities. Thank you very much.
just to reiterate really what's already been said, a huge thank you to all of you in the room for all the support that you have already given to this situation. As Aidan said, I'm going to mainly talk about what's really happened within Voices in Exile and the support that's come from the parishes and other groups. Certainly in the last 18 months, we've been through partnership working and also in the increasing of our own capacity, we've really been able to help more people in a fuller and more holistic way. It's been referred to as the last 18 months, and I think that's probably a good time to start. So since that 18 months, we've been greatly able to increase our capacity of staff. We're really lucky in that we now have 5 paid members of staff. So we've got 2 full-time caseworkers, a part-time bilingual caseworker, we have an immigration advisor, and we have an administrator. I'm going to firstly just talk about the Syrian programme, so the managed migration route. And just to say, whilst I am talking about the Syrian programme, the government is currently proposing 2 other managed migration programmes, but they're currently on hold a little bit because they're still trying to get the numbers through for the Syrian programme. In terms of the Syrian programme, we're working alongside the Home Office, local authorities, the South East Migration Partnership, the DWP, Adult Social Care, Children's Services, and very specifically, Voices in Exile has been working with Brighton and Hove City Council, as well as East and West Sussex in more of a consultant's role. We've now received 24 people through that scheme in Brighton alone, and that has been made possible by private landlords coming forward and offering their properties at local housing allowance rates. I'm pleased to say actually 6 of those landlords are from the Catholic community as well. The other 2 have come via an estate agents. And the families are doing well. We're really in a lucky position in that another charity has just bought a house, so we will be expecting to receive another family hopefully in about 6 weeks' time, and the sale of that house has just been completed. That service that we run for the Syrian programme is everything from picking pre-arrival, setting up the houses. One thing that was touched on earlier is the work of the SVP, and I'm very grateful to the support we've had from Brighton and the Hove SVP and Emmaus in helping to furnish some of those properties for the people that have come through, and picking them up from the airport, enrolling them in GPs, schools, and a full casework service that at the moment we're providing for 2 years. We've also been running specialised English classes for those new arrivals. We've been doing these in conjunction with the Friends Centre in Brighton, and those classes are running from St Mary Magdalene's Community Centre at the moment. And they're designed really to give that specialised support so that people can get into mainstream classes and start to move their way to independence. Also through, I'll say a little bit more about, with the diocesan funding, we have now trained a number of mentors, which we're starting to drip feed and start to match people. 2 so far have been specifically matched with people on that Syrian programme. And the programme has also managed to open the doors for other refugees and asylum seekers that we've been working with. Previously, it was very difficult to make contacts in the DWP and the CCG and some of those bodies. But now, because there are operational group meetings and more joint partnership, we're finding that we're being able to support more of the other asylum seekers and refugees that are coming to us. And that is the majority of our work are those other people seeking asylum, those refugees, and those with no recourse to public funds. Last year we worked with over 129 people, and that's not including family members. And people are coming to us from all over Sussex. We're really lucky in that this year, through the funding, it was actually from the Diocese of Chichester did an appeal, we were able to employ another full-time worker, which is now working through the Links project that David mentioned earlier. And we're being able to extend our support further, reaching out to more, as well as more people coming to us. Because of the generous response of landlords, we've also been able to house another 11 families into private accommodation. And that's properties that have come forward that where people haven't necessarily been, they're not within the time frame the Home Office needs, or they haven't been the right size of properties for the scheme. We've been able to use those for other families. One of the things that we're particularly proud of is the rent deposit scheme that has been set up. Initially, this was set up with a grant. We were given a grant of £10,000, and we put some money from our own general donations into it, with the hope of housing 7 families, which was 21 people. We've now managed to go over that, and there's now 9 families that have been supported through that rent in advance and deposit scheme. And we've just had some really good news in that the credit union are managing to extend that loan, and that pot's just gone up to just over £23,000. So that will be able to be accessed by refugees once they've got their status, and so that they can access private accommodation. Our drop-in service alone this year, our immigration advisor has seen 473 people, and we've seen 426 people for non-immigration advice. Through the mentoring scheme, we have increased the number of volunteers as well. We're now up to, I think, 23, with more through the pipeline that are just waiting to be matched with people, and that's for very different things. So that could be English support, it might be accompaniment to health appointments, and we're also looking at doing more work around the integration and supporting people with getting jobs. One of our volunteers at the moment has been working alongside local employers to look at who would help to employ refugees once they've got status, and also help them with things through the DWP as well. One of the things that has been touched on, and it is something that is going to get worse, is destitution. And this is something that we are seeing now. Last year, 106 people accessed, we get a certain amount of money from the Red Cross every year, which we make in direct payments of £10 a week for 12 weeks. Our food bank was accessed on 1,485 occasions, and the numbers are going up. The situations are getting very desperate, and we certainly saw at the drop-in post-Brexit a large number of EEA nationals who are increasingly finding themselves in difficult situations. But through the support and the help that we've got from the people in the room and from the other agencies and people that we're supporting, people are getting a lot more support. Again, with the destitution, we now have a scheme with Sussex Night Stop. So those that are destitute and under 26 can now be placed in homes whilst we sort out their situation. And I'm pleased to say 3 people have now been placed in that scheme as well. Thank you.
That's it. 3 minutes late. I'm just going to say a few thank yous before I invite Father Kevin up to close the day in prayer. Thank you all for coming, first and foremost. Thank you to Bishop Richard for all his contributions to the day. Father Augusto and Jenny, who's just had to leave us. I can't begin to process what I heard this morning. I'm going to have to listen to it again and again. Can I mention Jenny's email list? Encourage people to sign up. It's at the back. It's at the table right behind, right behind this row of chairs. Exhibitors, all of you, and I suppose especially the speakers this afternoon. I think that session went remarkably well. That was the one I was losing most sleep over, I can assure you. But even some of the early feedback is that they said they really enjoyed that 5-minute buzz session. Thank you to Mary-Jane, who's got a ridiculously busy schedule at the moment, and thank you for coming along and sharing those stories with us at the end here. So many volunteers, and I always single out the people who do the teas and coffees because that's very important, but they've all done a brilliant job. The Justice and Peace Commission that provide so much support and make days like this possible. My pastoral team colleagues, many of whom are here and I can see them, I'll single out Stephen White, actually, our intern, who's put a lot of materials together, put that wonderful reflection for us together this morning, and did an awful lot of work for that newsletter that we referred to just a short while ago. Luke, thank you very much, as usual. Where would we be without Luke? Tony, for his efforts with the sound today, much, much appreciated. And save the best till last, Ruth Guerin, who is a ridiculous calm head. I don't know whether she's still with us, but she's done a fantastic amount of work organising and supporting with the administration today. So I think that's it, unless Bishop Richard is about to tell me I've forgotten someone.
Aidan, you have forgotten somebody, and that is yourself.
Okay, Father Kevin.
Well, if Bishop Richard hadn't said that, I was just going to say exactly the same. Aidan, I think this happened last year. You thanked everybody in the room and then stepped away, and we said, how about you? Thank you, Aidan. I feel like we've been here for days. That's a compliment to everyone, the speakers. I feel like I've had a huge, rich meal, and I need a long walk and time to digest. I feel really grateful for today. I feel inspired. I feel motivated. It's been a really happy day. It's been a really friendly day. It seems like a long time ago that we heard the words from the letter of St. James at the beginning of the day, and I'm sure you remember that short reading ended by saying that unless we accompany faith with action, with good works, then faith is dead. And I think that's, just to finish with a moment of prayer, that's what we pray to the Lord, is that faith cannot be dead. It doesn't make sense, because faith is about God, and God is life. So may our faith always be a real connection with God. May faith always lead us to God and to bring and share God with others in action. Laudato Si, praise be to him, to the Lord, words that we associate with St. Francis of Assisi and his great canticle of praise. So I thought we'd just finish by praying together a prayer that I know people are now questioning whether it can be associated directly with Francis, but the prayer that we often do associate, the prayer, make me a channel of your peace. So if you want to join in, I'll pray it with the microphone, and you can just join in with me aloud or just in your hearts. Lord, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love. Where there is injury, I may bring pardon. Where there is discord, I may bring harmony. Where there is despair, I may bring hope. Where there is darkness, I may bring light. Where there is error, I may bring truth. O Divine Master, grant that I may seek always to comfort rather than to be comforted, to love rather than to be loved, to understand rather than to be understood. For it is in losing ourselves that we find ourselves. It is in forgiving others that we know forgiveness. And it is in dying that we awaken to eternal life. Amen. And may Almighty God bless us all, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And we sing the last two verses of our opening hymn. You remember that? We were going to sing the last two verses in the booklets. Many are homeless, longing for warmth. Many are cold. Make us your building, sheltering others, walls made of living stones. Christ be our light, shine in our hearts, shine through the darkness. Christ be our light, shine in your church, gathered today. Many the gifts, many the people, many the hearts that yearn to belong. Let us be servants to one another, making your kingdom come. Christ be our light, shine in our hearts, shine through the darkness. Christ be our light, shine in your church, gathered today.